Let's see if, did you start the recording, Angela?
Looks like it's recording.
Shows it.
Oh, it shows. Okay. All right. Well, if you got your Bibles, go ahead and open up to Isaiah chapter 58. We will be in verses 1 through 12. And today, the title is God Expects. And
Not judge, justifies.
say again.
Oh, God. Oh, yes, I got the right there. I'm ready. I'm okay.
All right. Last week we finished a very fabulous chapter, Isaiah 53. But I want to go ahead and bring you up to speed with what we did not cover, but I hope that you will go back and read. Chapter 54, the fertility of Zion, is a very encouraging chapter. So in other words, Isaiah, the people of Isaiah's time had much reason to be mournful and knowing that they were going to have to face the consequences of sin. But at the same time, God's not going to leave them there if they repent. So chapter 54 is very encouraging. I hope you'll also read chapter 55, where it's been identified as the free offer of mercy. You will find a lot of familiar biblical statements in this one chapter. And then the rewards for obedience to God. This is a chapter that gives a lot of motivation for living right. Chapter 57, evil leaders rebuked. So basically that's a chapter that talks about that there's no peace for the wicked. Then of course today is there's two elements in there. We're only going to be looking at one: observances of fast and keeping the Sabbath. And in the course of this case, the Sabbath is a little interesting because we don't follow the Sabbath like they did in the Old Testament based on Romans 14:5 and Colossians 2 verses 16 through 17. It's kind of like when in the vision, God told Peter, kill and eat. Well, because things have changed. Things are not the same as they used to be. So we are going to be looking at a number of things in this section. You could say that chapter 58:1 through 66:24 generally talk about the future glory of God's people, and that's Israel. And of course, today, as I mentioned just a second ago, two types of religion. In another sense, what's authentic and what's not. But the relevance for today's chapter, which is what I want to go ahead and bring to you now, the relevance has to do with what I call 1 day a week Christianity. Do we know what that means?
Sunday.
Sunday.
Yeah. Do we all know what it's like to live that way from time to time? Oh yeah, we all do. Sometimes we're not walking with the Lord, but we feel like we've got to be at church, so we go to church and we do our thing and then endure it and get out. But what if you weren't under conviction of the Holy Spirit and you just said, I'm just going to live this way all the time? And that would be a religious spirit constantly at work, whereas I'm at Christian on Sunday, but the rest of the week, home, school, work, or recreation, I do whatever I want to do. That's basically a surface Christianity. And that's pretty much what God was telling Isaiah to deal with that very thing, the surface facade religion that they had. So we're going to begin actually in verse 1. So if you have your Bibles open to Isaiah chapter 58, let's look at the first section where it says, cry loudly, do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet and declare to my people their wrongdoing and to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me by day and delight to know my ways, as a nation has done righteousness and has not forsaken the ordinance of their God. They ask me for just decisions. They delight in the nearness of God. By the way, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then let's look at verse 3. Why have we fasted and you do not see? That's what the people are asking. Why have we humbled ourselves and you do not notice? based on the day of your fast, and you find your desire and oppress your workers, behold, your fast for contention and strife, and to strike with a wicked fist. You do not fast like you have done today to make your voice heard on high. It is a fast like I choose, a day for a person to humble himself. Is it for bowing one's head like a reed and for spreading out sackcloth and ashes as a bed? Will you call this a fast, even an acceptable day to the Lord? So you have people talking, and you have people listening, and God is speaking. So here is what God is saying to Isaiah. He sees the facade, he sees the surface religion. So verse 1 says, cry loudly. Now, basically, he was saying in plain language that their behavior displeased the Lord. The word cry loudly literally means to cry out from the throat. So this is an urgent message. It's not sugarcoated, since they were offending God Almighty. Like a trumpet or a ram's horn, it was an attention getter. So the word wrongdoings means willful transgressions and defiance. So Isaiah is telling the people, you're doing this on purpose. You're acting in a way that's offensive to God, and it's not bothering you, and it should be. So verse 2 then says, yet they seek me day by day and delight to know my ways. Meaning this, they're basically going through the motions. There's a lot of pretense there. As a nation that has done righteousness. So externally, they looked the part, but they didn't look that way internally. Any thoughts on that? Any from anybody? Have we seen it before?
Yes, done it
Yeah.
before.
Sometimes we see it in others. Sometimes we even see it in the mirror, don't we?
Yes, right.
And so, in one sense, this is a great chapter for us to study because it is a warning against putting on facades and being religious. They notice this. They asked me for just decisions. If you ask God for a just decision, whose justice are you referring to? Are you talking about your own personal justice, or maybe things that they thought were wrong or unknowingly done upon themselves? I mean, this goes on all the time in our country. People are looking for what they call just decisions when actually they may be the guilty ones. Then notice this phrase, they delight in the nearness of God. Now, if you read that or you heard it for the first time a second ago, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? That these people, these surface Christianity people, they delight in the nearness of God. Does any picture come to your mind on that one? You know what came to my mind when I read it for the first time? I was thinking about people who seek religious emotional highs. In other words, man, I'm going to the church. I'm going to sing the Psalms. I'm going to be with the people I like. And I'm going to have an emotional high. But I'm not really interested in having my heart challenged. I just want to have a great experience. I mean, have we not seen the religious TV? People there just jumping up, down, screaming, having these emotional experiences. And yet, Jesus said, rather they should have the attitude of the tax collector in Luke 18:13. Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. By the way, that word mercy comes out real loud and clear in today's time with God. Angela?
I thought of an example of that. I have often seen people, my peers and others, that have gone off to a Christian college. They had the umbrella of Christianity over them, but they were far away from their parents and their other friends. And so they used that as an opportunity to experiment and try all different things. They weren't really Christian or acting like a Christian. They were living under the dorm of a Christian school so that they could have protection while they tried and experimented things.
Yeah. Some people don't like youth camp for the same reason. They say, oh, they're just having an emotional high. And the truth is, some of them, that's all they get out of it. But others, they get a whole lot more than that. Their lives get changed at youth camp. But some of them, but even, I found the kids that even when they're not really pursuing God a lot, they still want to go because they do want that experience. They want to see that God is real. Well, here, I don't think the people were quite that honest. So then verse 3 comes. Why have we fasted and you do not see? Now, who are they talking to?
Talking to God.
They're talking to God. What's their attitude in this phrase?
They're doing all the right things that they think they're supposed to be doing, and God's not answering because there's underlying sin in their lives and in their habits. But they think because they're the ones who are God's chosen people, and they have all the oracles and they have all the statutes, and they're doing those things. But it's just motion, the motions that they're going through, but their heart's not there.
Yeah. Does it sound like they're complaining?
Just a little.
Have you ever complained to God? God, why don't you recognize my actions? I'm doing all these things for you. I tithe. I go to church. I do this or that. It just seems like you don't listen to me. Ever felt that way before?
We're no different.
Yes.
It's like they're rebuking God.
Ooh.
They're
Yeah.
instead of looking for what they need to correct.
That can be a problem.
Yeah, Pastor Jimmy, I think it sounds a whole lot like a Pharisee. They wanted their religion, and they wanted it on their own terms. They didn't want God to mess with that. So, a lot of times that's the way we are. We don't want God to mess with our life. We want the religion, but we want it on our own terms.
And let me say this, what you just said in a little bit different way. They want God on their own terms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We both said the same thing. And then notice what they continue to say. We have humbled ourselves and you do not notice. Well, how do you define humility? You mean
they humble themselves in their own sight.
Okay. In other words, we went through all of this effort, and that's humbling God. I mean, fasting. I mean, I put down my chocolate cake, my chocolate pie, and all of that stuff, and you're not noticing. You're not responding to what I did.
I thought of something.
What's that?
Them saying that reminds me of just like legalism and trying to earn your way to heaven, like a lot of people try to do now. They're like, look at all these good things I've done, so why isn't that good enough?
Yeah. But that's the attitude of a half-hearted person. Now, notice the next phrase.
Jimmy,
yes.
Jimmy, it's like they're saying, we've decided what God looks like, and you don't look like it. You're going to have to change. You be like what we want you to be.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? Behold, on the day of your fast, you find your desire, meaning this, you get what you want out of it. And I think Jesus said something called practicing in the Sermon on the Mount, practicing your righteousness before men. In other words, and each time he describes what that is, he says, you got out of it everything you're going to get out of it. And that's pretty much what Isaiah is talking about here. And how do we know that it's not a real good fast? Notice the next phrase, and oppress all your workers. Now, Leviticus 19 clearly prohibited taking advantage of, we'll say it in our terms, employees. But here are these people religiously fasting and then violating the very scriptures that are associated with the God they claim to be fasting for. Behold, verse 4, you fast for contention and strife, which is the clear indication that they were hypocritical in their fast, and they resorted to contention, quarreling, and strife. Now, here's the bottom line. Will religion really change our behavior?
No.
No,
No.
genuine faith will.
Yes.
Genuine faith will change how I think, how I feel, and particularly what I do in relationship with others. A day for a person to humble himself, meaning this: are you really humbling yourself, or are you just trying to bargain with me? Are you trying to exchange? Lord, I'll do this if you'll do this. I'll fast if you'll do this. I'll go to church if you do that. One of my most favorite stories was to see this guy who his wife and daughter had kind of left the house. And boy, he got religion quick.
Mhm.
And he went and he picked the church he picked, the one they came to. And he tried to sell it to his wife and daughter. I don't think they ever bought into it. But he was trying to bargain with God, trying to bargain with them, and it didn't work. Once things didn't work out like he wanted, he's gone.
Mhm.
And it happened that quickly. So, for bowing one's head like a reed, spreading out sackcloth and ashes on a bed. So, all of these descriptions are physical expressions of what a fast is like, but they didn't match up with the internal heart. So then he asked this question: will you call this a fast, even an acceptable day to the Lord? When I read that and I thought about it, I said, basically, it's kind of like, it's as if God was saying, what are you trying to manipulate me to do?
Mhm.
As if I could be manipulated,
Mhm.
as if I could be hoodwinked into coming to you on your terms. I am not that God, the one that you think you're talking to. I am not moved like some of the idols you claim that are moved by evil people. So this was their true state, and Isaiah is pointing this out to them. Any thought on that before we move on? All right, let's move on to the next section then. Okay. Oh, by the way, that was, I mentioned this one, but it's worth looking at. It said, be merciful to me, a sinner. I forgot I'd put that in there. So true worship, verses 6-10. So here is God speaking. Is this not the fast that I choose? To release the bonds of wickedness, to undo the ropes of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free, and break every yoke. It is not to break your bread with the hungry, and bring the homeless poor into the house. When you see the naked, to cover him, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh. Then your light will break out like the dawn, and your recovery will spring up quickly, and your righteousness will go before you. The glory of the Lord will be your rear guard, and you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here I am. If you remove the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the, should say the pointing of the finger. That's where that extra T came from above. The pointing of your finger and speaking wickedness. And if you offer yourself to the hungry and satisfy the need of the afflicted, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your gloom will be like midday.
Mhm.
So we've seen the indictment on them. Now God is saying, all right, here's your solution. You want one? I've got one for you. Is this not the fast that I choose? So here God is going to describe, this is what I want in a fast that you claim as a worship.
Mhm.
And that is this: the kind that seeks God's presence, that changes hearts. Now, there are going to be two major changes in people. So in other words, God, what do you want? He's looking for two major changes in them. You could say he's looking for those two major changes in us. And with each of these words, each one of these changes, he's going to give some word pictures for them to look at. So, for example, the first one is this: the first major change is to release the bonds of the wickedness. So here is a picture, all right, um, which is the way of uplifting others rather than oppressing them. He says, release. Here's the picture: undo the chains that enslaved people to sin, leading to oppressing others, which the prophets condemn. One of the things that I thought about when I read this was a particular chapter in Scripture from Romans 6, where it says, do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or obedience, which leads to righteousness? And then 2 verses later, it says, but having been set free from sin and have become slaves of righteousness. That chapter right there is worth looking at. It's worth memorizing, because there it gets right into it. And this is what God has in mind. He wants people free from sin. And then notice the next phrase. Here's the second picture: undo the ropes of the yoke. Now, if I'm just going to go with what they said, because I don't know enough about how this worked. But they would put a yoke on oxen, right? And then they would take ropes to hold them together. Sometimes those ropes are way, way too tight, and it hurts the animals. So here's the second picture. They were tied together, and it needs to be loosened, undo them. Then here's the third picture. Let the oppressed go free. Now, the oppressed would be 2 types of people who are in prison. One, wrongful imprisonment, or forced slavery. Either way, they need to go free. Have we heard of people that have been wrongfully imprisoned?
Oh, yes.
Or wrongfully sentenced? You know, they do one little thing wrong and they're sentenced for 10 years, and these rapists get out in 1. You know, it doesn't make sense. There's no justice there. Well, in this case, he's saying they need to go free. So can you think of a picture or an example of the Israelites living in bondage as a group?
In Egypt.
Egypt.
That is the simple one. Every Israelite would be able to picture this. They themselves were slaves. They were in bondage. And here he said, if you can get that picture in your head, I want you to do the same thing. I want you to help people break the chains and break the bondage. And as a matter of fact, he says that the last picture, the 4th picture, is break every yoke. Meaning this, it's not just the ropes, it's the yoke itself that is now removed. So a genuine fast, or genuine worship in this case, was all 4 of these pictures. This is what God was looking for. All right, any thought on that before we go to the second major change that God was looking for? Okay. Angela, you're muted if you were trying to say something.
It also reminds me of what we're going to get to probably next week or the next week, Isaiah 61, when the servant is described, that he came to bind up the brokenhearted, to bring good news to afflicted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and freedom to the prisoners. I think Isaiah and God are setting up the Israelites to say, this is the way you need to be and who you need to be. And then in a couple of presentations later, God's going to say, yeah, my chosen one's going to come to do this.
Right. All right. So let's, again, who is speaking here in this second section? It is God saying, okay, in the first section, he said, this is what you've done wrong. Second section, this is what I expect of you. This is what I want you to do. So he gives us, again, 2 pictures. The first is 2 changes. First, to uplift others and oppress others. And here's the second change. This was a positive one. Now help others. So in other words, release them in one change, help them in the other change. And each of those changes had 4 pictures. Well, let's look at this next one. The second change of helping others. There are 4 examples given. Verse 7 has the first one. Is it not to break your bread with the hungry? So in other words, yeah, if you want to fast, that's fine. And it should and fasting makes you hungry. So therefore, if you have the kind of change that I'm looking for, then feed the hungry yourselves. Now that you know what it's like, you feed them. Then notice the second one. Bring the homeless poor into your house. So here's a second example of helping others, showing compassion and grace by sheltering. This last week, I was talking with somebody who was being sheltered, you know, and I thought, wow, what a timely example. And then the next one, here's a third example. When you see the naked, to cover him. By the way, does this remind you of anything in the New Testament? Can anybody think of an example in the New Testament? Matthew 25, for example.
Sermon on the Mount.
I was hungry and you gave me something. Yeah.
I was
Thirsty. I was naked and you covered me. I was sick or in prison and you visited me. So this section right here reminds me almost exactly. If you want to look at it, read it, Matthew chapter 25, starting with verse 35. And then here's a fourth example, not to hide yourself from your own flesh. Now, you might not know exactly what that means, but this is referring to taking care of your own family. Do you think of a verse in the New Testament that deals with this?
You're worse than an imbecile if you don't take care of your family.
Yeah. 1 Timothy 5:8. You're right, if you're taking notes. The Bible makes it very clear that if your biological family or adopted family, however that works, you and I have a responsibility to them and to each other. And somebody who's truly had life change and is practicing religion that God admires and wants, yeah, they take care of their own. Then by the way, that's always the truth. You know, some people say, what should the church be doing? Well, number one, the family should be the first line of defense, the individual family. Then the second line of defense is the Sunday school groups. We take care of our small groups. And then if those two fail, then the rest of the church can step in and help out where we can. But the God has an order to things, but unfortunately, they're not always followed. And so there's safeguards all the time. Then notice verse 8. If we do those things, number one, if the first change is we treat people right, and then number two, I mean, we don't treat people wrong, I'm sorry. And then the second change is we treat people right. What will happen? Verse 8, then your light will break off like the dawn. Ever heard of the song, This Little Light of Mine? Can anybody quote Matthew 5:16?
5:16. Give us a hint.
I'll give you a clue. Let your light
so shine that man will see your good works and glorify the Father which is in heaven.
Yeah. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in. I tell you, there's a lot in this chapter that deals directly with the New Testament, isn't there?
Amen.
And what the New Testament teaches. He's talking about new life, new hope, and a new future. Then notice the next phrase. Your recovery will spring up quickly. Now, if you go back to verse 3, you remember what happened there? The people complained about God not noticing their fast. Yet here's the funny thing. He did notice their fast. And what did he say? They don't work. I did notice your fast. Okay? They didn't work. It doesn't grab my heart. So now I'm telling you the truth so you can change. The truth will what?
Set you free.
It can set you free. So while they were complaining in verse 3, now he's saying your recovery from that type of false religion will set you free. And your righteousness will go before you. Now, the picture here, I mean this, yours and mine righteousness is like having an army in front of you. That's the picture. So you've got an army in front of you. How secure are you if you got the army in front of you?
You need somebody to have your back.
Yeah, if I, I think if I was fighting in the army, I'd say, you guys go before me and I'll back you up all the way.
No. That doesn't
Well,
work.
in this case, that's basically what he's saying. Look, your righteousness will go before you. Okay. If you change, you will be like the Lord that you're following, and it will show. Is that a pretty good deal?
Mhm.
Well, look at the next phrase. It's even better. That's just as good. The glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. So you've got your righteousness in front of you and you got God's glory behind you. That's not bad. So his very presence in you protects you. Isn't that pretty cool? Now,
Amen.
remember in the first section, they were wondering, Lord, where are you? We're doing all this religious stuff and we're seeking your presence. You're not there. And God is saying, you do it right. I am there. I'm in front of you. I'm
Amen.
behind you. And if you read the New Testament, you can say this, you can add this. I am in you doing all of these things. So that's pretty cool. And then, so it says, then you will call and the Lord will answer.
Yes.
And by the way, real change in my life and your life, God responds,
Mhm.
doesn't he?
He does. Yes, he does.
By the way, he, like we said in the first section, he did respond to the people. He told them what they were doing wrong. That's a response.
Mhm.
In this next section that we're in right now, he's telling you what you're doing right. Both are responses. Both are important. Then it says the pointing of the finger and the speaking of wickedness. That's referring to, I missed one. It says, you will cry for help. The second phrase in verse 9, you will cry for help. And he will say, here I am. So you will have God's responsiveness, or said another way, you'll have his attention. If you remove the yoke from your midst, meaning this, now we're getting back to, he's going back to the first section for just a second. He says, if you remove the yoke from your midst, I mean, the ones that you put on yourself and the ones you put on others, the pointing of the finger and the speaking of wickedness, meaning accusations and slander toward others. Verse 10, if you offer yourself to the hungry, satisfy the need of the afflicted. Now, this is what I would consider saying this is a real ministry heart, meaning you get my heart and you'll see what you'll look at people differently. You'll treat them differently. Then he repeats himself. Then your light will rise in the darkness. Now remember, sin and darkness go together. We already mentioned Matthew 5:16. Your gloom will become like the midday. By the way, what part of the day is the least amount of shadows?
At noon.
Noon, because the sun is directly over and it's shining
Right.
straight down. When the sun is either going up or coming down, you get these angles, you get the more shadows. And he says, your gloom will become like the midday, meaning it's going to disappear. Like shadows, they will disappear. All right. Now, so we got bad worship, we got true worship. Any comments on either one of those two sections before we move on to the last one?
Okay.
All right. Let's look at the third section then. True satisfaction, and the Lord will continually guide you and satisfy your desire in scorched places and give strength to your bones. And you will be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Those from among you will rebuild the ancient ruins. You will raise up the age-old foundations, and you will be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets in which you dwell. So you've got number one, a true state of their poor worship, and then God gives them true worship, how to do it. And now section 3, he's given them the motivation of why you should go ahead and do it. The Lord will continually guide you. Now, why is that? How can the Lord guide you?
Through his word.
Okay. Well, put it this way. If he's in front of you and you're following, guess what? You are near him. Remember, that was the complaint in the first section. Where is God? Where is his nearness? Well, the problem is you're not following. If you're following, look, you're asking, it's one thing to say, religion will say, God, I'm going this way, you follow me and stay near to me. That's what religion says. But Christianity, and what he's saying here is, God's going this way, you get behind him, you follow him, and you're going to be near. Have you ever wandered off the path?
Yes.
Let's be honest, have we wandered off the path before? And then we wonder, God, where are you? Well, it's not that he left you, you've left him. So the nearness of God can be practiced by us if we are following all the time. Then you will satisfy your desire in scorched places. How many of y'all have the words a parched land there? Anybody? Yeah, we got at least one person. All right. Now, the word satisfy means ease a burden. Now, here's the question. Does God take away the scorched land, or does he walk with you through it?
Walk with us through it.
Yeah. In this life, you're going to have parched places. You're going to have scorched earth. And God's not going to just remove that from you. He's going to say, no, I'll walk with you through it because I even have a purpose for that. So in other words, I will satisfy you. I will ease the burden of that. So that assures us of his presence. And it doesn't take away the scorched land. It just means he will be with us when we walk through it. And give strength to your bones. Now, when you read that, when you hear that phrase or you read it, what comes to your mind? Why is that important? What are the importance of bones here? Or bones in general, what do they do?
They hold you up.
They hold you up.
When
What
you get
else?
older, they support you.
So they support. You got 1 out of 2.
I think it also gives us protection in some areas, like it protects our vital organs, and it also protects our brain and that sort of thing, and aids us with nourishment.
Right.
Okay, I like that one. So like your ribs do in your skull. So you've got support, protection, what else?
You've got life, because blood is made in the bone marrow.
Yes. So you get 3 things. And I think that's why this particular phrase is in there. You get stability, you get protection, and you get health. What happens if your bones are not producing blood like they should?
You're in trouble.
You're in real trouble.
You're
Yeah.
in real-
Life is in the blood, and the blood is made in the bones. And then it says you will be like a watered garden. Probably he's got in mind here a vineyard or a grove of olive trees, which are well nourished. Now remember, do olive trees and vineyards have to go through storms,
Oh, yes.
high winds?
Mhm.
How about
Knocked around.
oppressive heat? But if they're watered sufficiently from underneath, can they survive that?
Oh, yeah.
And what does Jesus call? One of the things he calls himself? Living what?
Water.
Living water. So Isaiah is describing that. Springs of water do not fail. Remember, a spring is a source, and here's the picture is God. And so if this is a spring of water is a priceless resource, both agriculturally and with Jesus being the living water, spiritually speaking. Those from among you, excuse me, sorry, Mom, I can't talk to you right now.
Bless her heart.
Those from among you will rebuild the ancient ruins, raise foundations, repair the breaches. Hold on just for a second. Let me turn this. I normally do this on Saturdays. I turn the ringer off. Now check this out. You'll love this phrase. Those from among you will rebuild the ancient ruins, raise foundations, repair the breach. Can you think of people who did that in the Old Testament? Who were they?
Nehemiah and Ezra, Nehemiah and Ezra.
Ezra, Nehemiah. Who else?
Mhm.
One other person that kind of stood out. Zerubbabel. You had these three people. They were heroes in the Old Testament, right? Of course, they're going to come later, but they were rebuilders. They were people who repaired, and they did all that. Wouldn't you like to be noted for that? Somebody that's like that. This is what true satisfaction is. You got the right, you've got a right relationship with God, not just empty religion. God will do all of these things in you, and He will do things through you. Now, I want to end up with talking about something. Have you heard of COVID-19 hypocrisy? You know what that means? Okay, I'm a governor. Whatever I say is and decree is the law for you. But whatever I do is the law for me. Have we seen that this week? Oh, yes, we sure have. That's called hypocrisy. And I mean, there's two sets of laws. There's oppression that goes on. Well, if we can see that in the 21st century and it's live and well going on, imagine what God, picture what God saw and during that time. And these leaders saying that there are rules for me that are different from the rules for you. And maybe sometimes we get the same way, that we feel like God's laws are meant for other people, but I don't have to follow them. So today's lesson is about being a true worshiper, experiencing true satisfaction, and avoiding the hypocrisy of religion. All right. Any other closing thought on that today? Yes, Angela?
I was reading out of one of my study Bibles last night, and the applications in this said, this is from Charles Colson. The Christian life begins with obedience, depends on obedience, and results in obedience. We can't escape it. The orders from our commander-in-chief are plain. Whoever has my commandments and obeys them, he is the one who loves me. Loving God, really loving Him, means living out His commands no matter what the cost. And the application was, the next time you sing at church, during the second stanza, ask yourselves, why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why am I singing? Why did I bring my Bible? Examine your motives. I thought those were some questions, because God was getting the people of Israel to examine their motives in this chapter.
Yeah. Tomorrow, I'll be quoting or referring to some verses very similar to that. I'll make sure I get the reference right. Let's see. Yeah, Psalms 139, 23, and 24. Anybody know that one? I always forget the 119. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me to the path that is everlasting. That's close. So thank you for sharing that, Angela. All right. Any other last word on what we read today? Only one more week in Isaiah, and then we will be moving on back to the New Testament in the Gospel of Luke. And as things are going right now, until they start getting that vaccine distributed, it looks like we'll be going into the new year continuing to do this. So, and that's all right. I've enjoyed doing this. I get about twice this teaching time that I used to get when we're doing it on Sunday for less than an hour. So Johnny understands that, don't you?
Yeah.
Typically we have 30 minutes of teaching and 30 minutes of sharing and caring. But when we're doing this on Saturdays, we can do a whole lot more.
Sure would like to get back to Sunday school though.
Yeah, I agree with you. I miss that time together, being close by and getting that interaction. Well, tomorrow at Grace Baptist Church, we will be doing our normal 10 o'clock worship service. And then afterwards, for those who are comfortable with it, we'll be doing a meal. And if you can come and participate, I hope you will. 3001 West Green Oaks Boulevard here in Arlington. So we hope that you join us. If not, on Facebook Live and then later on YouTube. The guy two boxes down from me is the guy who always puts it on YouTube for us. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. All right. Then Angela, go ahead and stop the recording, and then we're going to move into our group prayer time.